In the hemp industry, there is a constant debate around whether CO2 or ethanol is better for extracting cannabinoids. Is CO2 a truly solventless extraction process like some manufacturers like to report? Find out in this video, where we dissect the pros and cons of ethanol versus CO2 hemp extraction. There are multiple methods used for hemp extraction, and a lot of confusion around whether CO2 is a cleaner way to extract cannabinoids. Extractors that use CO2 often make the claim that their extraction method is superior to ethanol extraction, and some even go as far as to say their CO2 extraction method is solventless. But did you know that every CO2 extraction method uses ethanol or a similar solvent for winterization? That's just one of the surprising facts you'll learn in this video. Discover the truth behind the differences between CO2 and ethanol extraction, and find out why we chose ethanol at GVB Biopharma. Let's start with the basics. What is hemp extraction? Hemp extraction is the process of removing desirable substances from hemp and concentrating them into usable extracts. You can extract any type of hemp or any part of the plant, but hemp buds contain the highest concentrations of cannabinoids and other desirable substances. To remove lipid-based cannabinoids and terpenes from cannabis, a solvent must be used. This solvent essentially knocks the cannabinol-bearing sacs, also known as trichomes, off plant matter and collects the resulting oil in a catchment container. The process is more complicated than it may appear. Extracting hemp entails a variety of steps, materials, tools, and skill sets that only a qualified extractor can deliver. Even with all your ducks in a row, it's still possible to make serious mistakes during hemp extraction. Let's dive a little deeper into the different types of hemp extraction. These days, there are close to a dozen different hemp and cannabis extraction methods. Some are so pure that they don't use any solvents at all, but only a few methods are appropriate for commercial applications. The top 3 types of hemp extraction used commercially are ethanol extraction, CO2 extraction, and hydrocarbon extraction. First and foremost, let's talk about ethanol extraction. At this stage in cannabis science, ethanol extraction is the most efficient and reliable option available. Provided with proper evaporation and recovery protocols, ethanol extraction offers the same degree of purity as CO2, and the unique properties of ethanol as a solvent make it inherently more suited for extracting hemp, a plant with both aqueous and lipid components. GVB's proprietary cryogenic extraction process, which uses cold ethanol, means the winterization step is skipped altogether, and only desirable parts of the plant are targeted on the initial extraction. While oftentimes this point is overlooked, it's important to note that even CO2 extraction uses solvents like ethanol or even hydrocarbons during the purification process. The initial extraction could be called solventless, but CO2 extract loses the right to this title the moment it's exposed to additional substances. How does ethanol extraction work? Ethanol extraction starts with drying and grinding of raw biomass. Then comes the ethanol extraction, also known as the first run, followed by ethanol evaporation. The next step is winterization or clarification with recovered alcohol, also known as the second run, followed by crude oil distillation. The distillate can then be rendered into a crystalline isolate if desired. As simply as possible, let's state why GVB Biopharma chooses ethanol extraction. The pros: ethanol is efficient, sustainable, high purity, and requires fewer steps. No winterization is needed. The cons: unwanted substances can also be extracted, but they're easy to remove later. GVB's proprietary cryogenic extraction process mitigates this. Now let's talk CO2 extraction. Compared to ethanol, CO2 sounds a lot more benign, and you're partially right. CO2 is one of the building blocks of life, and the human body produces tons of it. Matters may not be as simple as they appear though. CO2 is a lot more expensive than ethanol, and the results it delivers aren't noticeably better. How does CO2 extraction work? It begins just like ethanol extraction with the drying and grinding of raw biomass. Then the CO2 extraction occurs, followed by ethanol winterization or clarification, and finally crude oil distillation. The distillate can then be rendered into crystalline isolate if desired. The pros and cons of CO2 extraction. To be fair, CO2 and ethanol are neck and neck when it comes to commercial viability. In the end though, we're confident that ethanol comes out ahead. The pros: high purity. CO2 is associated with good quality due to marketing. The cons: CO2 is expensive, wasteful, and marketing can be deceptive. CO2 extraction is not truly solventless because a solvent is required for refining. As a result, CO2 extraction often still uses ethanol during one of the purification stages. It should be noted that unrefined CO2 oil can be considered solventless, but because it contains fats and lipids, it is unusable in finished products. Finally, let's dive into hydrocarbon extraction. In hydrocarbon extraction, a hydrocarbon molecule such as butane or propane is exuded through biomass or other hemp plant matter to derive concentrated extract. Of all available hemp extraction methods, however, hydrocarbon extraction is the most dangerous, both to extractors and consumers. Hydrocarbon extraction is only utilized for low-cost extracts due to the material's volatility. How does hydrocarbon extraction work? Like other extraction methods, it begins with the drying and grinding of raw biomass. Then the hydrocarbon extraction occurs, followed by semi-effective solvent removal. The next step is ethanol winterization or clarification. Then comes the crude oil distillation. Finally, the distillate can then be rendered into crystalline isolate if desired. What are the pros and cons of hydrocarbon extraction? The pros: this method is cheap and fast. The cons: hydrocarbon extraction is considered dangerous and volatile. Also, carcinogenic solvents are often left behind in these extracts. As a result, these extracts often taste and look worse. CO2 and ethanol extraction are clearly the two best extraction methods for premium cannabinoid extracts. In the end, there isn't much bad we can say about CO2 as an extraction process. As a commercial enterprise, however, CO2 extraction pales in comparison to ethanol extraction without offering any significantly enhanced benefits. At GVB Biopharma, it's our goal to offer the highest quality products at the best prices. In pursuit of this overall ethos, we chose ethanol as our extraction process. Contrary to common misconception, ethanol is no less pure than CO2. And always remember, pretty much every company that says they extract with CO2 uses ethanol in their process. We believe that ethanol extraction is the most ethical option, and it delivers the best results for the lowest prices. It's important to note that solventless hemp extraction does exist. There are hemp extracts that could be considered truly solventless, but CO2 extraction certainly is not one of them. If it isn't ethanol, another type of solvent must be used during the CO2 distillate clarification process, making it impossible for CO2 extractors to have a completely solventless extraction method. Examples of truly solventless hemp extracts include bubble hash and heat rosin. Both methods can be considered cottage industries at best, though, and can't hold a candle to commercial output of ethanol or CO2. We believe that ethanol extraction is the simplest, cleanest, and most sustainable extraction method available for commercial use. Ethanol hemp extraction has a few distinct benefits. First, it's less expensive by far than CO2 extraction, passing on savings to brands and consumers. Next, you can extract both lipid, oil-based, and aqueous, water-based substances with ethanol, allowing a wider spectrum of substances to be removed from cannabis. This dual nature of ethanol extraction also makes it easier to clarify raw extract in further distillation phases. Closed-loop ethanol extraction is highly sustainable, and as a resource, ethanol is easier and less environmentally harmful to obtain than CO2. In conclusion, ethanol extraction is the purest method available. Ethanol evaporates in the atmosphere without leaving any residual solvents behind. As long as your extraction process is clean, you should derive clean results. Acquiring, containing, and recapturing CO2 used for extraction is laborious and inefficient. Since CO2 extractors almost invariably use ethanol at some point in the process anyway, relying exclusively on CO2 for extraction is more for optics than it is in the pursuit of any practical agenda. We hope this video has helped clarify the differences in hemp extraction methods. And if you have any further questions about GVB Biopharma's extraction process or our raw materials, please reach out to us on gvbbiopharma.com.